I first realized a man could evaporate from his own life when I opened the refrigerator and found my name written on a single shelf label that hadn't been there the night before. 50 years old, a former construction supervisor who still woke at 5 each morning, and already my existence inside my wife's family home was being reduced to a sticker. The Cartwright house had been hers for generations. I was a late addition, tolerated like a modern appliance that didn't quite match the antique cabinetry. Amber, 38, razor-sharp in heels, heir to an old marketing agency, had convinced me to quit 2 years earlier. "You've carried beams and paychecks long enough," she said, brushing drywall dust from my hair. "Let me handle the bills while you finally breathe." It sounded harmless, even loving. I accepted, traded hard hats for gardening gloves, and moved into the stately colonial on Juniper Drive, a house lined with ancestral portraits that watched me like museum guards. At first, the arrangement felt like vacation. Sunrise jogs, sourdough experiments, repairs she never had time to schedule. Money arrived through her, but pride slept easy because she kept reminding me we were a team. Changes crept in like damp under floorboards. My leather reading chair disappeared from the library, replaced by a Scandinavian sculpture of a seat no one could relax in. Family photos rearranged themselves overnight. Amber's lineage moved eye level. Our wedding snapshot slid downward toward the baseboard. The smart thermostat locked at 78 whenever I left a room, even on cold mornings. Mail addressed to me began arriving opened, resealed with neat tape. Amber's parents, who lived in the guest wing, offered polite smiles that never reached their eyes and asked if I had considered returning to the workforce for structure. The bank statements told another story. Large transfers labeled strategic expansion bled from the joint savings account I barely touched. When I asked, Amber waved a manicured hand. Campaign expenses, all reimbursable. Reimbursable to whom? She never said. She started spending weekends at industry retreats, always unreachable after dusk. One night, I pressed her location tag by accident and saw coordinates 2 counties away, at a lakeside resort known for couples packages. She explained it was a booking glitch, kissed me, and suggested I trust her the way she trusted me to run the home. The real alarm rang when her father invited me for bourbon in the mahogany study. Small talk about baseball drifted into estate planning, then into a packet of legal documents slid across polished wood. "Purely administrative," he said, gesturing with the fountain pen already uncapped. The forms transferred my spousal tenancy interests in the property into Amber's sole control for tax efficiency. I turned the pages slowly, pretending to read clauses I already understood. A builder learns to spot structural shortcuts. These papers were held together with wishful thinking. I thanked him, pocketed the packet, and left without signing. Amber staged dinner that night like a proposal scene. Candlelight, herb-crusted salmon, jazz whispering in the background. After 2 bites, she laid her fork down and spoke of accountants, liability shields, and how aligning deeds with reality protected everyone. I asked what danger required protection. She smiled, said reality evolves. When I declined, gently, her face tightened just enough for the candle flame to flicker in her pupils. She poured extra wine into my glass, touched my wrist, and suggested we sleep on it. I agreed. Neither of us slept. She tossed under silk sheets while I lay still, counting the seconds between her sighs. The following week felt like a silent siege. Amber texted bland apologies for late nights. Her mother appeared each afternoon, inspecting pantry inventories and frowning at my choice of brand-name cereal. A surveyor I'd never met roamed the basement, checking for moisture ingress, photographing tool chests with more interest than foundation walls. I locked the basement door afterward. Thursday, near midnight, I bumped into Amber in the corridor. Her phone screen glowed with a smiling male face before she flipped it over. She claimed it was a client in Tokyo. I smelled cedar cologne on her hair. Nothing like Tokyo, everything like someone else's passenger seat. Saturday delivered 2 strangers in tailored jackets. Amber announced them as home energy consultants assessing eligibility for sustainability grants. They toured every room, scribbling notes, photographing closets, whispering over tablets. When one mentioned that single occupancy could accelerate certain approvals, I asked which occupant they had in mind. He offered a thin apology and redirected the conversation to insulation. Amber could not meet my eyes. After they left, She suggested a temporary separation, said the house's aura felt tense, that perhaps I would benefit from a lakeside cabin her firm kept for creative retreats. She spoke softly, shepherding me toward exile with therapeutic vocabulary. I nodded, poured 2 fingers of scotch, and promised to consider it. But while she described paddleboard yoga and journaling prompts, my mind sketched blueprints. They wanted a clean eviction, no cops, no headlines, just a husband who drifted away so the Cartwright legacy could reset itself. Whether another man waited in the wings or Amber simply craved an unencumbered life in her ancestral museum was irrelevant. They believed I would slip out like a stray page from their family album. When the house went dark, I moved to the unused guest room and opened my laptop. I created a folder named Contingency and began logging every anomaly. Dates, transfers, unapproved visitors, the energy consultant's business card I had pawned from his pocket. I scheduled an appointment with a lawyer friend for Monday, set up a motion-activated camera facing the basement door, and changed the password on the home router. At the top of the document, I typed a single line in bold: I am not leaving. For the first time in months, the floorboards felt level under my feet. Outside, the river kept flowing, indifferent, but I finally felt the current turning in my favor, quiet, steady, unstoppable as time. Amber didn't press the issue the next morning. No documents, no follow-ups, no sugar-coated legalese. She simply kissed me on the cheek, sipped her green smoothie, and said she had meetings all day. Her tone was light, but her eyes flicked toward the study door, as if checking whether I'd quietly comply in her absence. I didn't. The packet from Richard stayed untouched on my desk. I spent the day fixing a cracked retaining wall in the garden, then sharpening tools that didn't need sharpening. I needed to stay grounded. Busy hands, clear mind. Amber returned late, said little, and spent the evening locked in her home office with the door half closed. I heard her voice through the walls, low and intimate, but not businesslike. The next week moved like fog through a cold field. The warmth between us thinned to a polite mist. Amber's parents, once formally cordial, now treated me like a house guest long past his checkout time. Her mother began accidentally moving my shoes to the mudroom closet. Her father resumed calling me Doug instead of Douglas, a small thing, but deliberate. Strangers began appearing more often. Some were introduced as consultants or wellness coaches, others as estate advisors. All walked through our shared home like they already owned it. One Thursday afternoon, I stepped out of the shower to find a man photographing our bedroom window from the backyard. He claimed to be checking for UV exposure patterns. I asked for ID. He didn't have any. At dinner that night, I asked Amber about him. She paused over her wine glass and said, "Richard's looking into upgrading the house's energy efficiency. Future-proofing. You wouldn't understand the tax structure." Then she turned the conversation to a docuseries she claimed we'd started together, one I didn't recognize. I let her talk. Then came the small, tactical moves. My name was removed from the family grocery account. A standing tool order I had at the local hardware store was suddenly frozen. When I asked the manager, he said the billing information had changed. Amber blamed a system glitch. "Don't worry," she said with a dismissive smile. "You're not the admin anymore." I just tidied it up. 2 nights later, she sat on the edge of the bed with crossed arms and a gentle voice. "I think it might be good for both of us if you took some space. Just for a while. There's a guest house upstate. Miles says solitude could help you reset your rhythm." I blinked slowly. "Miles?" She smiled too quickly. "Dr. Hartley, the wellness specialist. He works with family systems. You met him, tall, linen shirt." I remembered. The man who examined our pantry like it was a case study. "Amber," I said carefully, "do you think I'm unwell?" She reached for my hand, didn't touch it. "Not unwell. Just stuck. I think you've lost your sense of purpose." I nodded. "And the way to fix that is to disappear?" Her expression didn't change. Sometimes space gives clarity. I looked at her then. Not the way I had when we were dating. Not even like a husband looking at his wife. I looked at her like a man surveying a wall before demolition. No emotion, just analysis. The next day, I called Victor Singh. We hadn't spoken in months, but he picked up like I'd called yesterday. I told him I needed quiet legal consultation. No drama. No paper trails. He said he'd clear the afternoon. Victor met me at a small firm he operated downtown, above a clock repair shop. The office smelled like old wood and ink. I laid out everything I'd experienced. the paperwork, the shift in treatment, the growing pressure to step aside. Victor listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back. They're building a narrative, Douglas. One where you're unstable, voluntarily stepping away. So when they cut you out completely, it looks like your choice. I figured. They want you to leave the house, give up rights, maybe even sign over assets if you have any joint holdings you've forgotten about. Once you're out, they'll paint you as volatile or broken. If things go to court, their version will be clean. Sanitized. Yours will sound like regret. I nodded slowly. So I stay. You stay, he confirmed. And you start documenting everything. That night, I bought a new phone, a pocket voice recorder, and a discrete camera. I started backing up files to a hard drive Amber didn't know existed. Every strange visitor, every passive-aggressive remark, every unexplained financial move. I recorded it all. The next week, Amber left town for a retreat. Said it would give me time to think. The moment she pulled out of the driveway, I searched the trash and found an itinerary tucked inside a paper sleeve. It wasn't a retreat. It was a weekend reservation at a luxury lodge known for reconnection therapy. The second guest's name wasn't listed, but I didn't need to see it. The confirmation code matched one I saw on her phone weeks ago, half hidden behind a chat with Miles Hartley. I went to the basement and opened my old steel toolbox. At the bottom, beneath layers of bolts and drill bits, was a printed copy of our prenuptial agreement. Amber didn't know I had kept it, and she definitely didn't remember the clause about cohabitation-based residency rights. The next day, I changed the router password, installed encryption software on my laptop, ordered a separate P.O. box, and rerouted all bank notifications. When Amber returned, she was glowing, relaxed. She kissed me on the cheek and asked if I'd considered her offer. I have, I said, smiling. She looked pleased. And, I'll stay. This is still my home. She blinked once. Of course. For now. Later that night, I heard her speaking to someone on the phone, voice hushed. He's still here? No, not yet. Yeah, I'll keep pressing. She never noticed the tiny red light glowing from the bookshelf. I saved the recording to the folder marked red. They thought they were pushing me out, but they'd just made a mistake. They left me inside long enough to learn the structure. And I know how to bring down structures from within. The hardest part wasn't staying calm. I'd worked decades in construction sites where silence solved more than shouting. The hardest part was pretending not to know. Pretending I didn't hear Amber whispering with Miles in the hallway. Pretending I didn't notice how she left her laptop open just long enough for me to see his initials in her calendar, or how she casually dropped phrases like emotional boundaries and joint transitions when we were alone in the kitchen. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I kept collecting. Every deleted calendar event I restored from her synced phone, every voice memo I recorded, every receipt she left crumpled in her car. I cataloged everything. My folder system was simple: Amber, Miles, property, leverage. Victor helped me clean up the legal exposure. Turns out, when Amber incorporated her agency under the Cartwright name, she overlooked something. A tiny operational arm tied to my name, created back when I helped fund one of her digital projects. A small, sleepy LLC buried inside a stack of old tax filings. It was still active, still registered to me. We filed to reactivate it quietly. Then Victor helped me secure access to certain shared copyrights, branding assets, and web infrastructure Amber had assumed were entirely hers. I didn't move anything yet, just secured the doors. Amber grew more irritable by the week. She called me passive-aggressive, said I was holding on to resentment, claimed I made her walk on eggshells. Her mother started speaking to me in clipped, one-sentence statements. Her father stopped acknowledging me entirely. The final confirmation came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Amber had left her iPad in the kitchen. Normally she was careful, but that day she was in a rush, late for her individual coaching session. I opened it, not out of curiosity, but because I knew what I was looking for. The browser tab was still open. It was an email thread. Subject line: Property Exit Plan, Staging Proposal. Sender: Miles Hartley. He had attached a PDF. I downloaded it. It was a guide, 6 pages, written in corporate tone, outlining how to prepare a joint living space for emotional separation and asset transition. It suggested removing personal items gradually, rewriting household roles, and documenting minor incidents to later use as behavioral evidence. One section detailed How to guide the partner into voluntary relocation. They weren't just waiting for me to leave. They were building a case to push me. I closed the iPad and poured myself a glass of water. I didn't shake. I didn't blink. I just made a mental note to label a new folder. Exit plan, theirs. Over the next few days, I acted exactly the same. I asked about her day. I cooked dinner. I stayed out of the way. But I also took steps. I moved some of my tools and personal items to a rented storage unit under a different name. I backed up every recording, email, and scanned document to an encrypted cloud server. I withdrew small amounts of cash and deposited them into a secure credit union account. No red flags. No attention. Then I went deeper. Using the old access credentials I'd once helped Amber set up, I logged into the content management system for her agency's main site. She hadn't changed the password. I didn't alter anything. I just downloaded a full archive. Inside, I found more than brand guides and promotional decks. I found investor summaries. I found a spreadsheet, dated 6 weeks ago, labeled Post-Exit Projections. Amber had already forecasted revenue under her name alone. She listed me as former support figure, no legal stake. There it was, in her own handwriting. Erasure. I printed the sheet, highlighted that line. The next day, I met with a private investigator Victor recommended. His name was Harlan. 50-something, no nonsense, wore a leather jacket, and carried a spiral notebook. He didn't ask for drama, just facts. I gave him everything. Track her, I said. I don't need affairs. I need proof of strategy. I want to know where she meets him, who they meet with, what they're planning next. He nodded. Any timeline, just before they act. Amber's next move came quicker than I thought. On Sunday, after a long, silent breakfast, she brought it up. I've decided to go to the cabin, she said. Just for a few weeks. I think we both need space. Alone? I asked. She hesitated. For now, Miles might come up to help with the transition coaching. I nodded. Do you want me to help you pack? She looked surprised. That's kind of you. She left Tuesday morning. Car packed, sunglasses on, a soft scarf tied loosely around her neck like a woman in a movie about reinvention. The second the gate closed behind her, I opened the safe. I laid everything out on the dining room table. Documents, photos, copies of emails, legal records, the exit plan. I reviewed it like a general preparing for a siege. I even printed out the PDF Miles had written and highlighted each tactic they had already used. Then I drafted my own plan. Step 1. Submit all materials to Victor for formal documentation and timestamping. Step 2. Initiate a freeze request on all jointly managed funds, citing suspected coercion. Step 3. Email a summary of Amber's behavior to the advisory board of her agency, using neutral language and backed by attachments. Step 4. Arrange a meeting with her father. He didn't respect me, but he respected his name, and he didn't know his daughter's lover was about to use that name on a shell corporation. Step 5. Wait. I didn't know how long it would take for the walls to close in, but I knew one thing with certainty. They thought I was the quiet man in the room, the one too kind or too weak to fight. They forgot something important. I wasn't raised in this house. I didn't inherit my place in it. I had built every part of my life with my own hands. And now, I was ready to take it apart, quietly, methodically, brick by brick. I didn't react when Amber returned. She expected a scene, maybe even a confrontation. Instead, I greeted her with a nod, helped carry in her bag, and asked if she wanted coffee. She looked at me for a long moment, probably trying to decide whether I'd cracked or simply given up. I didn't care which conclusion she reached. Her arrival meant one thing. It was time to begin. She tried to resume life as it was before. Smiles over breakfast, polite small talk in the evenings, soft apologies for being so distant lately. I played along, nodding where appropriate, offering neutral answers. Meanwhile, I monitored the shared accounts, watched her messages sync to the household cloud, and logged every name that appeared more than once. Miles was more careful now. He never texted directly anymore. Only encrypted voice calls and notes passed through shared drives. But the system wasn't built for secrecy. It was built for efficiency, and I knew where every seam was. The game became psychological. I left small clues that I knew more than I let on. A page from her exit strategy packet left open on the desk. One of Miles's meeting invites printed and set casually on the kitchen counter. Each time, she'd go pale for half a second, then pretend she hadn't seen it. She wanted to believe she was still in control, that I was unraveling quietly. She didn't know I was building. On Thursday, I called Richard Cartwright and asked to meet him alone. He was surprised, but intrigued. We met at his private golf club, where he assumed his name still carried weight. I let him order a drink before I slid a folder across the table. Inside, copies of emails between Amber and Miles discussing the house, the business, and the plan to gradually push Douglas into independent relocation. There were notes outlining how Richard's name could be used to legitimize the title transfer, even without his full consent. One bullet point read, "Play to his ego. Frame it as legacy protection." He read it in silence. When he finally looked up, his face was blank. "Is this verified?" I nodded. "Check the metadata." I didn't alter a word. He closed the folder. "What do you want?" "Nothing," I said. "Just to be left alone. And for your daughter to stop treating people like property." He didn't apologize. Just said, "You always were a bit of a ghost in that house." "Good," I said. "Ghosts are hard to catch." I walked out without shaking his hand. Back at home, Amber was on the phone in the study. She didn't notice me standing in the hallway until I coughed gently. She jumped, ended the call, and smiled too wide. "Hey, I was just talking to Miles," I said. "Yeah, I heard." She froze for half a second. Then she narrowed her eyes. "What are you doing, Douglas?" "Watching," I said calmly. "Documenting. Waiting." "For what?" "For the right moment." That evening, I sent out 5 anonymous emails. One to the board of Amber's agency, one to the HR department, one to a local business journal, one to the state licensing bureau, and one to a personal investor who happened to be Victor's client. Each email included attachments, communications between Amber and Miles, unapproved spending records, screenshots of financial misrepresentation. No threats, no accusations, just facts. I didn't include my name. I didn't have to. By Monday, the first cracks had formed. Amber came into the kitchen pale and quiet. She said a few meetings were postponed, that the agency's internal audit had been accelerated. I nodded, poured coffee, and asked if she needed anything. "No," she said. "Everything's fine." But I watched her thumb tremble as she held the cup. She tried to regain control. She reached out to Miles more aggressively. I saw calendar invites for back-to-back calls. A note labeled damage control. She even asked me, sweetly, if I'd like to go away for a weekend. Just us. To reset. I told her I'd think about it. That night, I changed the locks on my storage unit and removed all personal documents from the house. The safe that used to hold old contracts now held only decoys. The real files were elsewhere. By Wednesday, I received a call from Victor. "She's trying to freeze your assets," he said flatly. "I figured," I said. "Let her try. We've already blocked it." "But Douglas, she's not backing off. She's desperate." "That's good," I replied. "Desperate people make mistakes." Later that day, I discovered one. Amber had forgotten to sign out of a business platform. In a shared folder was a video, recorded during one of her private sessions with Miles. It wasn't graphic, but it was personal. It was enough. I didn't need revenge. I needed leverage. I made 3 copies, encrypted and secured them. Then I scheduled a formal sit-down with her. Just us. No threats. No yelling. Just facts. She arrived dressed like she was headed to court, buttoned up, flawless makeup, cold calm. I laid out the evidence. One piece at a time. Her face shifted from defiance to fear, then to something colder, calculation. "What do you want, Douglas?" "I want nothing," I said. "But here's what's going to happen." I explained that I had already secured legal protections, that I had backups in multiple locations, that any attempt to discredit me would trigger a legal response and a very public release of information. "You're not going to win," I said softly. "You're going to disappear. Quietly. With what I allow you to keep." She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just looked down at the table and said, "You always were better at hiding than fighting." I stood. That's why I'm still here. By the next morning, her side of the closet was empty. No goodbye, just silence. Exactly what I wanted. Amber was gone before sunrise. No note. No message. No apology. Just an empty closet, a faint smell of her perfume in the bathroom, and a silence that felt intentional. I didn't celebrate. I just stood in the doorway of the master bedroom, took one long breath, and shut the door behind me. I didn't plan to use that room again. I made coffee, checked the house cameras, and reviewed the inbox I'd set up specifically for this moment. The first message arrived at 8:14 a.m. It was from a member of the agency board. Thank you for the documentation. We're initiating an emergency review of Cartwright Creative's leadership. This matter will be handled discreetly. At 9:07 came another. Please be advised your wife no longer has access to the shared investor portal. Her login credentials were revoked as of this morning. By noon, 3 more messages confirmed what I'd hoped. Her grip on the agency was slipping fast. She didn't even know it yet, but she would. Amber had spent years building herself up in those circles: business brunches, keynote talks, personal brand consultants. She crafted an image of control and elegance, of being born into success and sharpening it like a blade. That image didn't survive a single spreadsheet and 5 emails. That's the thing about curated reputations. They don't survive open windows. By 3 p.m., I received a text from an unknown number. You think this makes you right? I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She knew I wouldn't answer. That silence would hit harder than any argument. I went for a walk, just around the block. It had been weeks since I'd done that without looking over my shoulder. Now I walked freely. My phone buzzed in my pocket a few times. I didn't check it. When I got back to the house, 2 cars I didn't recognize were parked near the gate. One had a dash cam. The other was a tinted sedan with no plates on the front. She was trying to intimidate me. It was sloppy. I walked past them with my head high and shut the front door behind me without a word. The next morning, I sat down with Victor in his office. He was already smiling. She tried to file a temporary restraining order, he said. Claimed emotional manipulation, privacy invasion, and coercion. I nodded. And she submitted no evidence. Meanwhile, we submitted everything. The judge refused her petition and ordered an emergency review of her business dealings. She's unraveling. She's exposed, Victor corrected. She played with fire and assumed you didn't know how to strike a match. Later that day, Harlan, the investigator, sent his final update. Miles had quietly moved out of his apartment. He'd cut off contact with Amber, shut down his website, and even removed his name from a few mindfulness directories. Amber was on her own. Her agency released a brief public statement 2 days later. Effective immediately, Amber Cartwright is no longer affiliated with Cartwright Creative in any leadership capacity. We thank her for her service and wish her well. They didn't even give her a paragraph. That night, I poured a glass of bourbon and sat on the back porch. The air was still. The street was quiet. I could almost hear the hum of everything coming undone. I received one more email before I turned in. It was from Richard. We'll be handling the transition of the property title in accordance with the family trust's original terms. You are no longer expected to sign anything. Please consider the matter closed. Short, cold, effective. That was fine by me. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived. Inside was a proposal from Amber's lawyer, a private agreement, no media, mutual asset release. A polite request to let her walk away without further noise. I handed it to Victor. Let her go, I said. I got what I wanted. He nodded. No countersuit. She already lost more than I ever would have taken. That night, as I reviewed my folders one last time, I moved everything into one final archive. Encrypted. Name done. Amber never returned to the house. Her name vanished from accounts, memberships, and property records. Her photos were quietly removed from gallery websites, her interviews replaced by new names. The world she'd built no longer remembered her. Not because I destroyed it, but because I disconnected her from the source of its power. Me. She thought she could turn me into an afterthought. But I was the spine, the structure, the one holding it all up while she climbed. And when I stepped back, it all collapsed. I never heard her footsteps again. Not in the hallway. Not across the porch. Not on the stairs at night. Amber Cartwright left my life the way she came into it. On her terms, thinking she was in control. But when she walked out that final time, she didn't realize it was the last door she'd be able to close herself. The house was quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of silence that settles after demolition. No debris, no smoke. Just space. I didn't move furniture. I didn't change locks. There was no need. She wasn't coming back. There was nothing here left for her to manipulate, own, or ruin. I received no more emails. No calls. Not even a legal notice. I didn't need confirmation. The silence was confirmation. You don't need a headline to know someone's name stopped opening doors. When her picture disappeared from her agency's website, her bio was replaced with a 404 error. I took a screenshot. Just once. Then deleted it. Miles Hartley vanished too. Deleted his social media. Shuttered his coaching business. Word got around that he'd been involved in something messy and quietly removed from a handful of professional directories. A man who had once walked into my house and smiled at me behind therapeutic jargon now rented office space above a vape shop in a city 3 states away. I didn't chase him. I didn't need to. Amber had already cost him more than I ever could. Her family tried to recover. Richard Cartwright issued a private letter to clients and partners stating there had been a breach of internal trust and that certain initiatives were indefinitely postponed. The estate remained in his name, but the guest wing, the one Amber once called our future expansion area, was stripped bare. A contractor's van sat outside for 3 days straight. Then it was gone, and the wing remained sealed. Through Victor, I learned that Amber attempted to start a new venture under a different name. She pitched it as a rebranding project, a fresh voice in ethical storytelling. The pitch went nowhere. Everyone she reached out to had either heard whispers or seen documentation. Investors didn't want friction, and Amber had become friction in its purest form. A month passed, then 2. I didn't mention her name to anyone. I didn't explain what happened. I didn't need sympathy or applause. I had no interest in telling the story over drinks or at dinner tables. I had already lived it. That was enough. I received 1 letter. Handwritten. No return address. Neat cursive. I recognized it instantly. Douglas, you got what you wanted. I won't ask for forgiveness, because we both know I planned this long before it began. But I didn't plan to lose everything. I thought you were too quiet to act. I was wrong. You taught me that silence isn't weakness. It's patience. And you waited until I couldn't recover. Goodbye. Hey, I read it once. Then folded it. Then burned it. I didn't smile. I didn't feel anything at all. Because the point of all this was never revenge. It was removal. She wanted to erase me from her story. Instead, I erased her from mine. No lawsuit. No scandal. Just absence. The kind of absence you can't come back from. Because every bridge was already gone before she realized she needed it. People like Amber build ladders out of people like me. They climb, then pretend we were never there. But I didn't kick the ladder out from under her. I just walked away with the ground.